Group, what topic will our presentation in English be about?
What do you and Enrique think of basketball?
We'd better talk about a more adult topic rather than a football topic. What do you think of the STEM school failure?
It really is an interesting theme for a presentation.
I agree to make this team.
Okay, we're done with our presentation.
Push the button so we can see.
School failure is a reality that, unfortunately, is present in school environments and cannot and should not be indifferent to all of us. This is something quite complex and relative, as its study presents an enormous polysemy within the community of researchers and pedagogues. In general, the term school failure is applied when a student fails to achieve the proposed educational goals, referring to age or grade.
School failure began to gain more prominence when schooling became compulsory, being nowadays an extremely worrying issue that must be faced. The cause of school failure may be related to the child itself, the family home, and the school breast. This is the set of factors that are related to learning difficulties in children. However, if these are found in time, they can be overcome immediately. But when this does not happen, there are still several projects and strategies to combat school failure.
In general, the child with school failure is seen as a student who does not learn and does not acquire the knowledge imposed on him, resulting in failure for not studying. But does the child really want to, or, or do not want to learn? Should we judge the child for having learning difficulties? Through the research that my group and I have done, we have come to the conclusion that school failure is not always the fault of the student. For many teachers, this is the lack of basis, motivation, or skills of students, or even the dysfunction of educational, family, and social structures. There are few times when the teachers investigate and discuss the possible causes of their students' failure, leaving the blame almost or so entirely on them. However, the student's failure turns out to be in some way the failure of the school because the learning is not made or when acquired, they are insufficient for the student to progress in her school path. In other cases, children may suffer from some cognitive, sensory, or motor dysfunction. We can we can then talk about attention problems in which the child cannot capture the matter and disperses very easily with everything around him, which prevents the selection of information necessary for learning.
According to many researchers, here in the national territory, school failure and dropout are associated with students from the most disadvantaged economic, social, and cultural backgrounds to whom the school does not offer equal opportunities for access to learning to other students in the educational environment. But there are also researchers who think that school failure is caused by the functioning of the classes, because some students associated with teachers, with the programs of the subjects, and with factors external to them, not having pointed to the family as the cause of this failure. Portugal, in the European framework, is one of the countries with the highest retention rate. According to data from PICA, 2012, of the 31 countries under analysis, only 4 had retention values greater than 30%. In this, Portugal is included with a value of 34.3% of 15-year-old students with at least one retention in their school device.
A child with learning difficulties manifests certain specific behaviors that can be identified by teachers and family, and test results and tests are not necessarily detecting it. In the passing situation, the child is aware of his school performance and difficulties, revealing his suffering and heartbreak, presenting depressive symptoms, but asks for help and is eager to take advantage of it. In the second situation, the child does not express his distress and suffering, covering up his school failure through excuses and justifications, generally not appropriate to reality. Some of the behaviors observed in unsuccessful children are distraction, restlessness, little tolerance for frustration, aggressiveness, constant attention seek, somatic disorders, schizophrenic behavior, and delinquent behavior. Children who present a restless behavior which may or may not be related to hyperactivity disperse very easily, which leads to not being able to do concentrated tasks. As far as the low tolerance for frustration is concerned, these children do not accept the fact that they have a poor school performance while maintaining stereotypical behavior. They are unable to receive criticism, demoralized in relating to difficulties, and do not accept help. Aggressiveness is also one of the typical behaviors of the issue in question. Children are impulsive, dispersed, and disorganized. The little inner control they have is visible in their inability to make themselves understood coherently, presenting a confused and disconnected language. The children are very anxious because they cannot transform the tension they feel into constructive action, as well as the inappropriate behaviors they present in solving a problem. The constant search for attention is also a topic to consider, because the child always requires to the presence of an adult and his approval. It is controlling due to fear of loss, loneliness, abandonment, and refusal. This being a way to feel safe. Rebellion is also a behavior that is present, in which the child challenges the authorities besides having no difficulty in cooperating with friends and colleagues in work. Somatic disorders are the expression of psychic tension throughout composition or motricity is a normal defense mechanism of the child. For example, headaches and stomach tics, sucking the finger, hitting with the feet, among others. In schizophrenic behavior, the child gradually disconnects from reality, giving rise to bizarre and strange behaviors. This is begin to speak alone, in addition to going unnoticed. Finally, we have delinquent behaviors, in which the child acts regardless of social laws and satiating their impulse, such as stealing and causing fires, just like autism, in which the child is unable to relate to others and communicate verbally. In the sense through the behaviors of children, it is possible to identify early learning difficulties, so that in the future there is no school failure.
The fight against failure does not only involve an intervention that is carried out when it already exists. On the contrary, it begins with its prevention. If school failure is detected before it becomes effective, the child can continue their studies normally without difficulties and at their own pace. Just the simple fact of being more attentive to children and early identification of those who are more vulnerable or at risk is causing repetitions to decrease at the end of each school year. School failure is not a subject much discussed in preschool education because it is at this stage that it must be prevented so that children's difficulties are alleviated in the future. For this, we have the OCEP, Curriculum Guidelines for Preschool Education, a document by which educators must abide by so that children at the end of preschool education have achieved all the objectives proposed by the Ministry of Education, so that each child succeeds in the transition to the first cycle in a perspective of continuity of the learning they have already accomplished.
With regard to the fight against school failure, in the first cycle, several projects and programs take place in Portugal. One of the programs, launched by the Ministry of Education in 2010, is called More School Success, in which the Phoenix Project, the Turma Mais Project, among others, are inserted. This program aims to combat the levels of failure conceived by the schools themselves, in addition to effectively promoting pedagogical differentiation, betting on the prevention of failure throughout basic education. Prevention is essential to combat school failure, so teachers agree that it is possible to prevent failure in preschool education and continue this prevention in the first cycle of basic education. To make this happen, some strategies can be used, such as reducing the workload and reducing the number of students per class.
I think the work is good. What do you think?
I agree, the presentation got creative and different.
I wonder what the teacher will say.